You don't even need to take a picture. We're about to be on TV." The voice from the crowd rose over the cheering, the sound of people shifting in their seats, phones raised, hands clapping. A woman in the audience laughed as someone beside her shouted, "Take your glasses off, man, let me see the cameras." Turned, the applause swelled, and then came the introduction. Meet Oprah's twin. Carol Wood from Los Angeles stepped into the light, and for a second, the room froze. The resemblance to the Queen of Talk was unsettling. Same warm smile, same expressive eyes, the same way she carried herself. Yet before Carol ever became Oprah's double, she had lived a very different life. One spent sleeping in a van, homeless, with her 3 children, parked on quiet streets where no cameras were rolling. What if you saw a copy of yourself, a person who looked exactly like you in every detail, every small gesture, yet was a complete stranger? Would you feel curiosity or fear? That split second of recognition, of seeing your own face on someone else's body, is both chilling and strangely magnetic. Some people might laugh it off. Others might never quite recover from the unease. Each of us would respond differently to the realization that another version of us seems to exist somewhere out there. And the famous black celebrities in this story have already been forced into that moment. They've stood inches away from someone who shouldn't exist, but does. Will they be shocked, frightened, amused, or all three at once? Are you curious what really happened when they came face to face with their doubles? If so, follow closely as we open this peculiar case file and trace the eerie, indescribable emotions that emerged when these 15 well-known figures had to stare straight into the eyes of their own doppelgangers. 1. Barack Obama, the mysterious encounter before history called his name. In June 2006, long before the world was chanting his name at rallies, Barack Obama was still just a rising, relatively unknown senator. According to later accounts, he slipped away from the political pressure in Washington and chose a quieter destination, the sparsely populated island of Boa Vista in Cape Verde, a place of windswept dunes, scattered villages, and empty Atlantic horizons. The trip was meant to be simple, a quiet tour, some space to think, and a chance to disappear in nature for a few days. But the moment he arrived at the meeting point for a guided tour, that calm was shattered. Standing in front of the small group waiting to introduce himself was the tour guide Jose Oliveira. Obama paused. The others saw it too. Jos didn't just resemble him, he moved like him. The same easy smile, the same posture, the same way he stood with his shoulders relaxed yet alert. Tourists began whispering to each other, glancing between the senator and the guide, as if someone had accidentally placed a mirror in the middle of the group. With a warm, steady voice, Jos led them through ancient villages, narrow dirt roads, and quiet coastal paths. He talked about Cape Verde's history, colonial scars, music, migration, and resilience. But while the others listened, Obama kept finding his eyes pulled back to Jos. Every time the guide turned or laughed, it was like watching an alternate version of himself, one shaped by a different island, a different language, a different life. At the end of the tour, Jos shook hands with every tourist. When he reached Obama, he held his gaze a moment longer, smiling, as if he too felt the strange weight of the situation. "It's interesting," he said, "casually meeting someone I can honestly call my twin." Obama smiled, but the expression didn't erase the quiet unease underneath. Back in the United States, he reportedly told close friends about the bizarre meeting. To them, it sounded like one of those stories people repeat at dinner parties, a strange coincidence, something to laugh about, then move on. But 2 years later, in 2008, Barack Obama was sworn in as the first black president of the United States. Suddenly, the entire world knew his face. And on Boa Vista, everything changed for Jose. Residents began pointing strangers, stopped him in the street, and local reporters showed up with cameras. According to local media, he became a minor sensation, quickly labeled the Cape Verde Obama. Articles ran photos of him beside images of the new president, inviting people to compare the two. Rumors even spread that Obama had once considered using Jose as a stand-in at certain community events, a practical solution to a schedule that was becoming impossibly demanding. Whether that was true or just a story, people liked to repeat it, added another layer of mystery to their connection. Joss took the sudden attention with a mix of humor and disbelief. Tourists came not only for the landscape but to see the other Obama in person, to take photos, to stand next to him and test with their own eyes how similar they really were. Though the two men never met again, Joss's life became permanently linked to history. He remained in the public imagination, the island twin of the first black president, a living reminder that somewhere in the world, another version of you might be walking around unaware of the role they'll eventually play in your story. 2. Morgan Freeman, the doppelganger, lurking behind Hollywood scenes. In November 2017, on a Los Angeles soundstage, Hollywood legend Morgan Freeman stepped onto the set of The Nutcracker and the Four Realms. By then, his presence alone could quiet a room, a slow, measured walk, a calm face lined with decades of work, and a voice everyone recognized even before they saw him. The crew was busy setting up a complicated scene, one that required precise lighting, layers of fog, and the careful positioning of a stand-in before Morgan himself would step into the shot. As he moved toward the backstage area, he suddenly stopped. Someone was already standing on his mark. At first glance, it was just another crew member waiting for direction. But then the details hit the sharp, observant eyes, the subtle, knowing smile, the relaxed but controlled posture. For a moment, it looked like Morgan Freeman had walked straight into his own reflection. The only obvious difference was the man's braided hair, something that could easily vanish under a wig. The man was introduced as a professional actor, model, and voice artist from England, invited specifically because of how much he resembled Morgan. The crew needed someone who could stand under harsh lights, repeat movements for technical setups, and match the legendary actor's build and presence. When he saw Morgan approach the stand, and smiled politely and extended his hand. Morgan stayed still, studying him, his eyes narrowing with curiosity, as if he were trying to decide whether he was looking at a stranger or at a version of himself he didn't remember becoming. After a few seconds of silence, Morgan broke into laughter. "Oh, Lord," he said, shaking his head. "I don't know whether to be proud or confused seeing my double." "Who hired you for this?" the stand-in chuckled, explaining that his resemblance to Morgan had opened doors for him across the industry, commercial work, photo shoots, and now this. It all sounded professional, but Morgan, known for his high standards, wasn't fully convinced just yet. He decided to test him. "If you really want to stand in for me," Morgan said, "try this scene right now." But don't lose the essence of Morgan Freeman. It wasn't just about looks anymore. The stand-in stepped onto the stage. Under the heavy lights and drifting fog, he slid into character with surprising ease. He delivered lines in a deep, resonant voice that carried the same unhurried calm Morgan was famous for. His movements were relaxed, his presence grounded. To the crew watching from behind the monitors, the difference was almost impossible to detect. By the time the take was over, the room had gone quiet. Crew members glanced at one another, impressed, some even unsettled by the eerie similarity. Morgan himself had to admit that the performance was nearly flawless. Later that day, as they sat together between setups, the two men talked not as actor and imitation, but as professionals with strangely overlapping lives. Morgan realized the stand-in wasn't just copying him. He had his own discipline, his own passion, and his own path. They joked about how audiences might react if they both walked onto a red carpet at the same time, two Morgan Freemans, one real one, not leaving the public to decide which was which. Word of the doppelganger spread through the industry and across social media. The stand-in became a sought-after figure in his own right, a kind of shadow, echoing one of Hollywood's greatest voices. And somewhere between the cameras and the lights, he remained a quiet reminder. Even legends can find themselves face to face with another version of their story, standing just a few feet away. 3. Steve Harvey, the strange moment he met his twin on stage. In May 2015, on the brightly lit set of Family Feud in Atlanta, Georgia, Steve Harvey was in his element. The crowd was loud, the music pulsed between takes, and Steve's sharp suit, signature mustache, and quick-fire humor was preparing for a special episode featuring two notable families. One team, the Harvey family, included some of his own relatives. The other, the Johnson family, seemed ordinary at first glance. But they were hiding something the host didn't know about yet. Among the Johnsons stood James Johnson, a contestant whose resemblance to Steve went far beyond casual similarity. According to people who were there, he looked like a copy pulled from another life. Same smooth brown complexion, same distinct mustache, same broad, easy smile. When James walked onto the stage under the studio lights, Steve froze for a fraction of a second. The audience caught it immediately. Whispers spread through the rows, fingers pointed, and a low murmur rolled through the studio as people tried to process what they were seeing: two men standing just a few feet apart, with faces that looked like they belonged in the same mirror. Steve, never one to let a moment slip by, walked toward James with the swagger and timing that made him famous. "Hey, buddy," he said, his voice echoing through the studio. "I don't know if I got a long-lost twin, but if I do, it's definitely you." Laughter exploded from the audience, but beneath the jokes was something else, a shared sense of disbelief at just how exact the resemblance really was. Clips and photos from the episode quickly made their way online. Within the black community, especially on social media, people reacted with shock and amusement, posting side by side comparisons and arguing over who was who. Some viewers insisted it had to be a prank. Others swore James looked more like Steve than Steve himself. Throughout the recording, Steve and James played off each other effortlessly. Their humor overlapped in a way that felt unscripted and uncanny, similar timing, similar facial expressions, even similar ways of responding to the family's answers. It was as if the show had accidentally booked two versions of the same host. By the time the taping ended, the crowd had been laughing for so long that the studio felt lighter, like a pressure valve had been released. Later, Steve went to his personal social media and wrote, "Today, I met a twin brother. I never knew I had James Johnson. This man looks just like me. What an experience." It sounded like a joke, but for those who watched the episode or were there that day, the feeling lingered. Somewhere out there, a man walked around, carrying Steve Harvey's face style and charm, living a completely different life, until for one strange moment their paths crossed on a game show stage, and the whole world got to see it. 4. Eddie Murphy, the surreal moment his stand-in felt too real. In June 2024, high above Los Angeles, the crew of Beverly Hills Cop Axel F was racing against time. Lights glared off the edges of a rooftop, set safety harnesses clinked, and the air buzzed with the low hum of cameras being prepped. Eddie Murphy, Axel Foley himself, a legend whose face had defined entire eras of comedy, stood to the side watching the final checks for a dangerous sequence he would not personally perform. The plan was simple: a stand-in would step into the hazardous frame, hit the marks, and keep the illusion alive. But when the stand-in walked forward into the light, Eddie's composure cracked for a brief second. The man looked unnervingly like him. Same grin, same sharp features, same way of tilting his head, as if he were always one step ahead of the joke. The stand-in approached confidently, extended a hand, and smiled with relaxed charm. Eddie stared, then burst into laughter, shaking his head. "Man, people always say I got a long-lost twin," he said, "but I never thought someone would look this much like me." The stand-in shot back with a teasing line, "Maybe we should get a DNA test." The crew laughed, the tension eased, and the cameras rolled. As the scene unfolded, Eddie stayed near the monitors, watching every move. The stand-in sprinted, jumped, and hit every mark with an agility that felt like a younger, high-energy version of Eddie himself. For all the joking, there was something unsettling in seeing his own image move so freely in danger while he stood in the shadows. When the sequence wrapped, Eddie walked over with a more serious look, though the smile never left his face. "You know," he admitted, "I've always been nervous about someone standing in for me. But today you might be one of the best I've ever seen." They talked quietly off to the side about work, about the strange life of being mistaken for someone else, about the times both of them had heard you look just like Eddie Murphy. On that rooftop between the stunt cables and the city skyline, The moment was more than a technical necessity. It was a reminder that in Hollywood, someone can carry your face, your silhouette, even your laughter, yet walk away with a completely different story. 5. Will Smith, the hospital mix-up that went too far. In June 2024, inside the sterile bright halls of Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, Will Smith was expecting nothing more dramatic than a routine dental checkup. He sat in the waiting area, shoulders relaxed, cap pulled low, blending into the quiet rhythm of beeping machines and low-voiced conversations. At the same time, another man was moving through the same building. Shad Ellis, 43, from Bedfordshire, had spent over 2 decades working weddings, clubs, and corporate events as a Will Smith lookalike. He knew the weight of that face, the expectation, the recognition, the double takes. That day, however, he was there, not for a performance, but for a stomach scope, hoping to understand a nagging abdominal pain. Then the system slipped. 2 nurses emerged from separate rooms at almost the exact same moment. One held stomach scope results. The other held dental x-rays. In the confusion of names and identical faces, they made a quiet but significant mistake. Will was handed Shad's stomach scope report, and Shad was given Will's x-ray. Will glanced at his paperwork and frowned. "Stomach scope," he muttered. "I only came in for my teeth." He squinted closer and saw another name printed clearly, Shad Ellis. An unfamiliar identity attached to a result that was supposed to be his. Elsewhere in the building, Shad was staring at an image of teeth, the name Will Smith printed across the top. He raised an eyebrow, something between confusion and grim amusement crossing his face. This time, the familiar mistake had gone beyond casual recognition. Both men headed for the front desk. When they turned the corner and came face to face, the moment hung in the air, a strange, silent mirror image. For a second, neither spoke. They just looked at each other as if both were trying to decide which one was the original. Will broke the silence first. "Don't tell me this stomach scope is yours," he said, holding up the papers. Shad glanced at his own sheet and let out a laugh. "And this x-ray is yours. I didn't expect to meet you like this." They exchanged results, and the staff corrected the error, embarrassed. As the tension dissolved into laughter, Will learned that Shad had even been hired as his stand-in at the beginning of 2022 for a project he ultimately couldn't attend due to scheduling conflicts. 2 lives circling the same image, finally intersecting in a hospital corridor no camera crew had planned for. They left the building with their own medical answers, and a story almost no one would believe without seeing it themselves. 6. Don Cheadle meeting his twin brother to kill the rumor. On November 19, 2023, inside the Staples Center in Los Angeles, the crowd buzzed after a tense Los Angeles Lakers game. VIP sections were slowly emptying, the sound of sneakers on concrete, mixing with the distant echo of commentary fading from the arena speakers. Don Cheadle, the acclaimed actor, known for his precise, controlled performances, stepped out of the VIP area heading toward the exit. Not far away, rapper Freddie Gibbs stood with friends laughing, gesturing completely unaware that they were both at the center of a growing bizarre confusion. For years, fans online had said they looked alike. Same angular features, similar expressions, the kind of resemblance that makes strangers squint twice. That night, the talk boiled over when a broadcast camera cut to Gibbs in the stands, and the on-screen label mistakenly identified him as Don Cheadle. Crowds on social media erupted, insisting they had finally caught the two being confused in real time. To shut the door on the speculation, Freddie Gibbs decided to record a short video right there at the court. When Don heard about it, he didn't hesitate. He joined in to put the confusion to rest on camera. In the clip posted to X, formerly Twitter, Gibbs spoke directly into the lens. "All right, everybody. This is Don Cheadle. I'm Freddie Gibbs. We are not the same person." Don nodded, adding a dry, humorous line that made both of them laugh. They explained that they had been sitting in separate sections, watching the same game, and had nothing to do with the broadcast mix-up. The video ended with a friendly hug, their smiles clear as the surrounding crowd reacted with cheers and applause. Within hours, the clip went viral, pulling in millions of views. Fans flooded the comments with jokes. The Hollywood twins just cleared it up. I still can't believe these are two different people. Don later joked on a talk show that being mistaken for a rapper like Freddie was pretty entertaining, even if he had to clarify that he couldn't rap. Gibbs fired back online with his own playful response, thanking Uncle Don and joking that he definitely wasn't ready to take on a role in Hotel Rwanda. The world got its answer, but the resemblance remained a strange permanent glitch in the public's perception. 7. Queen Latifah, the twin looking back from the past. March 3, 2018. New York City. A cold afternoon wind pushing down the streets of Brooklyn, and Queen Latifah slipped quietly into a small neighborhood bookstore. No red carpet, no cameras, just the rustle of pages and the smell of aging paper. She moved through the aisles, fingers brushing over worn spines, until one book stopped her. Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. On the cover, a portrait stared back at her sharp, steady eyes, a radiant smile, a confident face that seemed carved with defiance. For a moment, Latifah didn't move. It felt like she was staring at an old photograph of herself. She bought the book and took it home. As she read, Hurston's powerful narrative pulled her in, but it was the portrait repeated at the back of the book that kept drawing her gaze. The expression seemed to say, "We are connected. You may not know how, but we are." Curiosity turned into quiet investigation. Latifah learned that Zora Neale Hurston had lived in Eatonville, Florida, and had been a trailblazing writer during the Harlem Renaissance. The more Latifah discovered, the more unsettling the parallels seemed: the physical resemblance, the boldness in their careers, the refusal to shrink in the face of systems that expected them to. Eventually, she traveled to the Zora Neale Hurston Museum in Eatonville. Inside the main exhibition room, she stopped dead in her tracks. On the wall hung a large portrait of Zora, alive with personality so vivid that Latifah reportedly whispered, "My God, that's either me or her." A curator nearby watching quietly smiled. "It's fascinating, isn't it?" they said softly. Zora was one of a kind, but I think she'd be happy to know that someone from the 21st century resembles her so strongly. Latifah stood there, caught between eras, feeling an eerie wave run through her. When the story of their resemblance spread online, some fans immediately began suggesting she should play Zora in a biopic. Latifah responded that the idea was interesting but never confirmed whether anything was in motion. If such a film ever happens, it would be more than a role. It would feel like a message passed across time, a reminder that some spirits, some faces never fully leave the stage. 8. Jay-Z, the mysterious photograph that refused to explain itself. On May 10, 2013, the New York Public Library was quiet in the early hours. Jay-Z walked through its familiar halls, drawn not by the noise of a concert or the flash of cameras, but by shelves of history. That day he headed to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, planning to scan a few works on music and the past. But something else was waiting. On a large screen, part of a digital archive, a black-and-white photograph from 1939 appeared. A group of young men stood on a Harlem sidewalk, dressed in the fashion of their time-capsule jackets, a street corner captured in frozen stillness. Jay-Z's eyes locked onto one face. One man standing casually among the group looked exactly like him. The angle of the head, the relaxed posture, the detached but present gaze, it was all there. Sylviane A. Diouf, overseeing the collection, stood beside him and watched his reaction. "Do you see it?" she asked quietly. "I still can't believe it myself. It really does look like you in a photograph from the past." Jay-Z said nothing at first. He simply stared, as if the longer he looked, the more details might reveal themselves. Eventually he murmured that this couldn't just be a simple coincidence. Jokingly, but with a hint of something deeper, he mentioned time travel, half laughing, half serious. "I don't know if this is a joke or the truth," he said, "but it feels unreal." Others in the room began to gather, drawn by the same magnetic oddity. Some snapped photos of the screen, sending them to social media, where theories, jokes, and conspiracy threads exploded. People dissected the image, zoomed in on the face, compared it to Jay-Z's current photos, and argued over whether this was proof of reincarnation, a glitch in time, or just a random man with a familiar face. No one ever uncovered the stranger's name or story. That absence kept the photograph controversial. A man who looked like Jay-Z, captured decades before he was born, whose life remained hidden behind the grain of the film. The unanswered questions only made the resemblance harder to shake. 9. Drake, the doppelganger he could not forgive. Drake, the global hip-hop force behind Take Care Nothing Was the Same and Certified Lover Boy, had built more than a career, he had built a persona. The haircut, the beard, the posture on stage, the way he moved through a crowd, every detail was instantly recognizable. In October 2021, Miami became the backdrop for a stranger stepping into that image. A young man named Izzy, 22, from Toronto, emerged on the scene, known online as Fake Drake. He adopted the same hairstyle, facial hair, and overall demeanor, leaning hard into the resemblance. According to reports, he made his living performing at small clubs and events, offering an almost perfect visual copy of Drake for crowds eager to say they'd seen him, even if they really hadn't. That month, Izzy took part in an event where he appeared alongside big names like Lil Wayne and Tory Lanez. Clips from the night quickly spread online, a man who looked strikingly like Drake, holding a mic, moving through a venue, as if he owned it. For some people, it was amusing. For Drake, it wasn't. Known for his assertive personality and intolerance for people exploiting his name, he reportedly warned Fake Drake not to use his likeness for deceptive purposes. The message was clear. This wasn't just cosplay anymore. It was crossing into a territory where identity itself was being monetized. Not long after, Fake Drake's presence on social media went quiet. No more daily posts, no more bold appearances. Maybe it was a strategic retreat, maybe fear, or maybe he simply realized how far things had gone. The line between inspiration and impersonation had been crossed, and Drake's reaction drew that border in permanent ink. 10. Oprah Winfrey, the surprise encounter on her own stage. Oprah Winfrey, the media powerhouse, whose talk show ran from 1986 to 2011, had spent decades listening to other people's stories. She knew how to read a room, how to sense a shift in energy, how to make millions of viewers feel like they were sitting in the front row. Meanwhile, Carol Wood's story had been unfolding far from that spotlight. She was a single mother, at one point homeless, living with her 3 children, in a van on the streets of Los Angeles. No cameras, no audience, just survival. Then slowly she began to notice how people reacted when they saw her. The comparisons, the double takes, the whispers, "You look just like Oprah." According to one widely shared telling, on a September day in 2017, Carol finally stepped into Oprah's orbit. During a taping connected to Oprah's brand, Carol stood up and introduced herself. The room seemed to tilt. From certain angles, it was hard to tell where Oprah ended and Carol began. Oprah walked closer, eyes curious surprise breaking through her usual composed expression. "I have to admit," she said, "we share an uncanny resemblance." Carol, embarrassed but proud, answered that she'd heard that all her life, but meeting Oprah in person turned the comments into something real, something unavoidable. The encounter didn't just electrify the studio. It spread fast across media, interviews, and social platforms. People posted screenshots, compared faces, and debated whether they could be long-lost relatives. Oprah and Carol both described the meeting as feeling like discovering a sister they never knew they had. In the aftermath, Oprah invited Carol to appear at other events and on additional programs, giving her a platform and a new beginning. For Carol, the resemblance that once felt like a strange burden suddenly opened doors into a different life. 11. Rihanna, the viral double, with a perfect makeup game. Rihanna, singer, mogul, fashion icon, and the driving force behind Fenty, had long been a face people tried to emulate. But few came as close as Priscilla Beatrice, a 28-year-old woman who began as a regular social media user and ended up becoming something more: Rihanna's unofficial mirror. Priscilla didn't just look like Rihanna. She studied the angles, the poses, the subtle expressions. She learned how to recreate the makeup, looks, the arch of the brow, the tilt of the head. When she transformed herself fully, the effect was unsettling, even for longtime fans. On August 17, 2020, her transformation went viral. A set of images and clips, styled perfectly in Rihanna's aesthetic, exploded across platforms. At first, people argued over whether it was actually Rihanna herself. Then came the twist. Rihanna noticed. Instead of reacting with anger or dismissing her, Rihanna posted a photo of Priscilla on Instagram with a playful caption asking where the album was, referring jokingly to the long-awaited Renine. The comment section erupted. Fans tagged friends, debated who was who, and praised Priscilla's ability to slip so convincingly into Rihanna's look. Priscilla had never imagined she'd be recognized this way, much less approved publicly. She moved from anonymous resemblance to being widely acknowledged as the viral Rihanna lookalike, a second image of the star carved from lighting angles and meticulous effort. 12. Beyoncé, the lookalike who turned every street into a stage. Beyoncé, an icon whose name alone carries the weight of entire stadiums, had inspired countless imitations over the years. But Brittany Williams from Detroit, Michigan stood out. Brittany's resemblance to Beyoncé was so startling that casual observers often froze, convinced they were looking at the singer herself. The way she walked, the way she smiled, even her body language carried a familiar charge. As she appeared in public, fans would swarm her, chasing her down sidewalks, begging for photos, treating her as if she were the real Beyoncé stepping out in disguise. She didn't simply share a face. She shared an energy. Online side-by-side comparisons spread, with people insisting she had to be Beyoncé's long-lost sibling. Some viewers wondered if it was all a carefully crafted impersonation, while others argued that no one could fake that level of resemblance. Regardless of the theory, Britney's presence sparked endless discussion. She forced people to confront how quickly they believed what their eyes told them, and how easily fame could be copied, at least on the surface, by someone who knew exactly how to hold a gaze. 13. Michael B. Jordan, the most controversial confusion in Hollywood. Michael B. Jordan built his reputation with intense performances in films like Creed and Black Panther, roles that required discipline, charisma, and a magnetic screen presence. Nick Cannon, a long-standing television personality and actor with his own distinct path, should have occupied a completely different lane. Yet somehow the public kept colliding their images. A video once circulated showing Jordan and Cannon at angles where, for a moment, their facial features seemed to overlap. According to online buzz, that clip ignited a wave of confusion. People asked whether they were seeing Michael B. Jordan or Nick Cannon, and arguments broke out in comment sections and group chats. The confusion escalated during an entertainment event. When Michael B. Jordan stepped onto the stage, a pocket of the crowd reportedly reacted in shock, some convinced they were seeing Cannon instead. Fans pushed forward for photos and autographs, forcing security to move in and re-establish control. Afterward, rumors spread that Nick Cannon had tried to lean into the resemblance, with some claiming he attempted to imitate Michael B. Jordan's image to reignite certain parts of his acting career. It was rumored that this only fueled the controversy further, even though nothing was officially confirmed. The entire episode highlighted a strange reality. In a world obsessed with image, even established careers can become tangled when faces start to overlap, and the line between identity and perception blurs. 14. Kim Kardashian confronting her mirror on the runway. Kim Kardashian, whose influence stretches from reality television to fashion, beauty, and business, has spent years living under lenses that record her every move. Her face has been replicated in filters, makeup tutorials, and plastic surgery offices around the world. Among the many lookalikes, Camila Osman stood out. Camila, a model with striking features, sun-kissed skin, sharp eyes, and bold styling choices, began sharing images online that quickly caught attention. From certain angles, she looked like Kim's reflection, same contoured features, same camera-ready gaze, same styled silhouette. Her social media presence only added to the illusion. Each posted photo, each carefully crafted pose, made it easier for people scrolling quickly to pause and ask, "Is that Kim?" The story reached another level when Kim and Camila appeared at the same major fashion event. Under the white-hot lights of the venue with cameras firing from every direction, the sight of both women in the same space felt almost staged, like a visual glitch in a live broadcast. When Kim finally realized her double was in the building, her reaction wasn't anger. She laughed, recognizing the oddness of seeing her own image walking toward her. Camila, aware of the surreal moment, playfully mimicked some of Kim's signature gestures, leaning into the scene. For a brief moment, the runway wasn't just about clothes. It was about the uncomfortable question: if someone can walk into a room and look so much like you that even fans hesitate, what does it really mean to own your own face? 15. Lewis Hamilton, the racing legend, moving at a snail's pace. Lewis Hamilton, a Formula One legend, is known for speed-controlled risk at impossible velocities, split-second decisions, and the almost inhuman calm required to drive on the edge. Neil Davis was none of those things. He was an ordinary man living an ordinary life, except for one detail: he looked like Lewis Hamilton. So much so that even close friends of Hamilton's would reportedly have to blink twice when they saw Neil's photos. One day, Neil was photographed behind the wheel of a regular car driving slowly down a street. No roar of an engine, no blurring scenery, just a man in traffic like anyone else. But when the image hit social media, Hamilton's fans reacted instantly. They believed it was Lewis. The photo spread at high speed, captioned and recaptioned